Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our council meeting this evening. First of all, would like to announce our new city manager. Lisa Higgs is with us tonight, and we've just been feeding her full of information all day, so if she doesn't say much tonight, she just doesn't have any room to say anything more. This is the fourth meeting of the 145th Council of the Corporation of the City of St. Thomas. And welcome all tonight. So first of all, any disclosures of interest from any of the members? Seeing none, on to minutes.
I have a motion that the minutes of the meeting held on February the 3rd, 2025 be confirmed. Moved by Councillor Peters, second by Councillor Herbert.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Council will now resolve itself into committee of the whole to deal with the following business. First committee this evening is Strategic Direction and Development. First item relates to the Housing Needs Assessment and Action Plan. Online with us this evening, we have Eric Craven from Watson and Associates and Tim Welsh from Tim Welsh Consulting to present the City of St. Thomas Housing Needs Study and Action Plan.
Great. So we have Eric.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Are you leading us off tonight?
I'm presenting jointly with my colleague Tim Welch, who I believe is also on the line, but I'll be starting the presentation when given direction. Thank you.
Please go ahead and thrill us with all the knowledge you have.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Your Worship and members of council. It's a pleasure to be with you here this evening to present our study. If you'll bear with me, I'll just share my screen and the presentation slide deck. Sorry about this. I'm having some technical challenges here opening the slide deck for some reason. Give me just 1 minute.
No worries. We'll give you a chance.
Thank you.
And then we'll ask you to do it by interpretive dance instead. So.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay, maybe I'm gonna have to just share my screen this way. Hopefully you can see my screen.
Yep, I can. Looks good.
Okay, excellent. No, I want to do the full view. Some reason I'm not getting the okay. Okay, hopefully no. All right, we're gonna just have to go with this. My apologies.
Please go ahead.
Okay, excellent. Thank you again for your patience. So I'm Eric Carvinen. I'm here to present the City of St. Thomas Housing Needs Study and Action Plan. And I'm joined this evening by Tim Welch, my colleague from Tim Welch Consulting. Watson and Associates was the lead consultant on this assignment, working in collaboration with Tim Welch Consulting on this project. And we're here to present our study findings and recommendations. So the Housing Needs Study and Action Plan provides for an assessment of current and future housing needs in the city of St. Thomas. We've done a very comprehensive assessment of housing situation in the city and future needs over the next 10 years. It does provide for very much a practical, attainable housing action plan for the city as a roadmap for the coming decade. The study is also intended to help inform the update of the city's 10-year housing and homelessness plan, which is currently underway. The study considers a broad range of factors, including macroeconomic conditions, demographic trends, and how they're influencing housing needs in the city. Also looked at real estate and market trends and how those are influencing affordability observations in the city. The study, while it was heavily oriented towards a technical analysis, we've also prepared and conducted an extensive community engagement component to help supplement our technical analysis and help inform our findings. So to provide a little context, St. Thomas, as many municipalities in southwestern Ontario and more broadly in Ontario, has experienced quite strong population growth over the past 5 to 10 years. And with growing population, there's demand for housing, more housing than in the past. And there's a continued need for the city to continue to focus on providing for a range of housing affordability options for new and existing residents. As we all know, St. Thomas is experiencing a renaissance in industrial and manufacturing development, and more broadly, economic and demographic drivers that are driving population growth potential in the city to levels not seen for a very long time. And over the next 3 decades, the city is expected to continue to see very strong population and employment growth, building on the success over the last 5 years. It's important to remember that with growth, it's important to continue to provide for well-balanced and complete communities. That includes ensuring that municipalities offer a wide range of housing options to accommodate a broad range of household income groups and household types. We are living in a bit of an interesting era right now in Ontario, and part of the challenge we've been facing over the last number of years is a range of economic and demographic trends that are influencing housing needs in quite a profound way. We've seen significant population growth in the province at historically high levels, driven by strong net migration, and that has really required municipalities to plan for a much higher quantum of housing and also a more diverse range of housing options. We're also currently facing an evolving provincial planning policy framework that's increasingly focused on expanding housing supply through Bill 23 and the new PPS, really to deal with and address the province's housing affordability crisis, as well as lack of market choice, which has become quite significant over the last number of years. And certainly St. Thomas has faced much of the similar types of headwinds with respect to these challenges in the housing sector. Now, it's important when looking at housing at a local municipal level to consider that when planning for population growth, there's a need to plan for housing needs across a wide range of the housing continuum. And this includes basically 2 buckets of housing: market housing, as well as non-market housing. And within that, the range of more affordable and less affordable housing options to accommodate a range of households. So market housing tends to be those focusing on ownership and market rental housing. So this would be housing that has, represented the majority of housing stock in St. Thomas historically, especially grade-related ownership. But there's also an important and growing need for non-market housing, particularly with respect to affordable housing, social housing, and that in the more transitional and supportive category. Much of that affordable housing that I mentioned is more what we consider near market housing, which is quite important from an affordability perspective. And so it's important for municipalities to consider this when planning for housing needs. So when we talk about affordable housing in St. Thomas, we need to look at this through the context of the provincial definition as it's defined at the local level. And for St. Thomas, affordable housing for ownership means essentially housing that costs no more than $316,000 or less in terms of purchase price. When we talk about affordable rental housing, we're referring to market rents that range between $1,000 or less for bachelor units, $1,097 or less for one-bedroom units, $1,477 for two-bedroom units or less in terms of monthly costs, and $1,540 or less for three-bedroom units. And so it's important to keep these metrics in mind as we discuss and explore what we mean by affordable housing at the local level. So before we get into a discussion on housing needs, it's important to have a bit of a context on population and housing growth trends in the city of St. Thomas, because demographic trends do influence housing needs locally. So St. Thomas's population has increased by about 23% since 2006, growing to about 46,400 in 2024. The city's housing base totals about 18,100 units. Currently, it is predominantly low-density housing in terms of your existing housing base. Of that 18,000 units, about 72% are comprised of single and semi-detached units. It's also interesting to note that as in any housing profile, there is a share of owner and renter households that comprise the total households in a community. In St. Thomas, the 18,000 occupied units, about 68% or two-thirds are owner occupied, compared to 32% which are renter occupied, which is very comparable to the provincial average of 69% owner occupied, 31% renter occupied. Incidentally, for a city the size of St. Thomas, the share of renter households is actually relatively high. As I had mentioned, St. Thomas is experiencing fairly strong population growth. As such, housing development activity has also accelerated over the past decade. You can see from this graph that over the last 10 years, housing development has averaged about 318 units per year over that 10-year period. Over the last 5 years, that number has started to increase quite significantly, with very strong growth, and particularly in 2020 and in 2023. Incidentally, in 2024, we now have the latest starts data from CMHC, and the CMHC housing starts data illustrates that housing starts in St. Thomas for 2024 totaled over 700 units. And so certainly you've seen very strong development activity in the last couple of years, and that's expected to continue. Now, one interesting observation I should mention as well, with respect to housing development activity, is that over the last 5-year period, the share of units that have been of higher density Housing types such as townhouses and apartments has increased as a share of the total housing development activity. So the share of new development is more oriented towards higher density dwellings as opposed to single detached units, and we expect that trend to continue. Now, I spoke about demographics and looking at population age structure is an important consideration when looking at housing needs. Similar to other communities in Ontario, St. Thomas's population is aging. The median age in St. Thomas in 2021 was 44 years of age, slightly older than the provincial average of 42. You can see from the graph here that the share of the 55 age group, 55 plus age group that is, has steadily increased since 2006. Where it represented about 27% of the population, increasing to about 35% in 2021. During that same period, the share of the younger population of those 19 and younger has decreased slightly. We expect that over the next coming decades, while the city is expected to continue to grow and welcome newcomers, the city's population base is expected to continue to age, particularly as the baby boomers continue to move into their retirement years. With respect to recent changes and shifts in household size, because of the aging of the population, we can see that over the last 5 years, between 2016 and 2021, a large share of household growth was in smaller sized households. So with 60% of household growth in St. Thomas comprised of either 1 or 2 person households. Much of this has been driven by strong household growth in that 55 plus age group that I mentioned, representing empty nesters, young seniors, and those seniors 65 plus. And so again, it does put a lot more demand and emphasis on smaller dwelling units. We also have prepared a profile of the city's housing inventory. And this has looked at both the market and non-market housing continuum that I spoke to earlier. You can see from this graph here that about 92% of St. Thomas's housing base is market housing. This is comprised largely of ownership housing, which represents about 2/3 of the total. So this would again be largely comprised of grade-related housing, such as single and semi-detached units. But there is also a growing rental market, particularly as it relates to the secondary rental market, but also more purpose-built rentals being constructed. And finally, I mentioned that non-market housing, about 8% of the total, or about 1,375 units in total. That share of 8% is actually relatively high compared to other municipalities of similar size to St. Thomas. So it does suggest that from a market, non-market perspective, St. Thomas has a relatively diverse range of housing supply. Now, in that regard, I did want to speak a little bit to that 1,375 units of non-market housing. The city, as a service manager, does provide for a range of social and transitional and supportive housing options in the city, and those are provided here. A large share of that is in social housing related to rent geared to income and also rent supplement programs, as well as there are some housing units that are affordable housing that are rented out at average market rents. That overall represents about 85% of the non-market housing total. About 15% of the housing in the non-market profile is represented through a range of supportive housing, as well as transitional housing supply options, as well as a range of emergency shelter beds. Now, in just chatting a little bit about affordable housing in the city of St. Thomas, it's important to have a bit of a discussion on housing price trends. This includes assessing average home prices and market rents, which have appreciated quite significantly in the city over the past 5 years. This is very similar to trends that we've seen in other communities in Ontario. So, for example, in the resale home market, since 2019, average home prices have increased from about 386,000 on average to about 612,000 in 2023, which represents about a 57% increase in prices. Incidentally, new single detached homes in St. Thomas are quite a bit more expensive, on average about 800,000 a unit. Market rents similarly have seen very strong price appreciation in that same 5-year period, increasing from an average of $860 in 2019 to about $1,330 on average in 2023. So rents in the city in that 5 years have increased by about 54%, which is quite significant. So now I'm going to shift gears and discuss existing housing needs in St. Thomas. So this is really looking at gaps in housing and how well or not housing is misaligned in terms of meeting the current needs of the population. Overall, there are a number of households that are what we consider in core housing need in the city of St. Thomas. So based on 2021 census data, about 1,860 households have housing that does not meet their needs, either in terms of requiring major repairs, meaning they're not in a good form of maintenance. They're not suitable from an overcrowding perspective, and also are not considered affordable for them, meaning they're spending 30% or more of their household income on shelter costs. So that 1,860 units or households represents about 11% of St. Thomas's total household profile. And so the share of those that are in core housing need in St. Thomas is actually slightly lower than the provincial average of 12%. So from a provincial average perspective, St. Thomas is doing better than the province as a whole in this regard. When looking at this from a severe core housing need, which looks at those same factors, but then also looks at households that are spending 50% or more of their income on shelter costs, the number of households in severe core housing need identified as 685 households. So again, those are those that are in more significant need for more affordable housing alternatives. As part of our analysis, we also considered and reviewed St. Thomas's wait list for social housing. As I'd mentioned, the city as a service manager does provide for a range of social housing units and does maintain, along with the broader county, a list of those that are on a wait list. Those that are on a rent geared to income wait list that identified their residency as the city of St. Thomas and not elsewhere in the county totals about 1,161 households that are currently waiting for this type of housing. Of those that are waiting, about 60% are households without dependents. So this would be comprised of largely single occupancy households as well as seniors. About 40% of those on the wait list are families. So again, quite a wide range of household types that are on a wait list for social housing in St. Thomas. So as part of the technical analysis, I mentioned that we had prepared and conducted a range of community and stakeholder consultation. This included 16 interviews with key stakeholders that have vested interests in housing in the community. We also prepared a focus group session and conducted it with people who have experienced homelessness as a lived experience. That included 8 participants in total. We also conducted one community survey where we received over 300 responses, and all that is included in our report if you're interested in the details from that engagement. The community survey indicated a number of interesting observations. First, that about 18% of respondents are living in insufficient space, so basically living in dwellings or units that are not sufficient for their needs from a space perspective. And also about 16% were also concerned about losing their home. So this is likely related to issues such as rent eviction or other matters related to not being able to afford their homes. The survey also highlighted a number of key challenges that we had already identified through the technical work, but helped confirm a number of them, including challenges with respect to affordability at the local level, rental availability more generally, particularly in terms of market choice and affordability around rental housing, and also the quality of housing supply that is available. We believe that the information received was well supplemented through the interviews and the focus groups as well, which echoed very similar concerns as what observations we found from the surveys, highlighting challenges with respect to affordability and the gap between affordable housing demand and supply, and the need for the city to continue to put an emphasis on support services for those experiencing housing insecurity. So it's important in this context to recognize St. Thomas in terms of being a leader in the housing area. This is an important sort of thing to make note of. We believe that the city has been, addressing housing and homelessness in a proactive manner, and is on a positive path to eliminating chronic homelessness in the city. The city, as a social housing provider, has worked hard with its community partners to also develop new supportive housing developments, which are definitely needed in the community and very important to address current housing needs. And it's recognized that the city, through council and the efforts of staff, are recognized as community advocates for those that are facing housing insecurity in the community. Okay, now, sorry about that. I just need to move the next slide here. So with that in mind, I want to also now move on to chatting a little bit about the future for St. Thomas. We've focused a lot here on existing housing needs and the existing situation in the city, and now we want to step forward and really look at it more through the lens of the future over the next decade and then some for the city of St. Thomas. And as I mentioned earlier, the city is expected to see very strong population growth over the coming decades. The city is expected to see a population of almost 80,000 by 2051. This is a very significant increase from the existing population of 46,000. It represents about a 77% increase in the population over that 27-year period. Over that same time period, we're looking at the city's housing base expanding by about 14,000 units, as well as seeing significant increases in employment at the local level. And these are obviously all have implications for housing and housing needs in the community. So one analysis that we undertook, which was quite important, was to look at specifically the 10-year housing needs for the city over the next decade between 2024 and 2034. And we identified that based on that broader forecast that I just presented, that the city will need about 7,700 housing units over the next 10 years, which represents about 770 units per year over that period. Of that, we expect that the need for housing will continue to be more diverse than it has been in the past, and the city will continue to have to be proactive in planning for this type of housing growth. So of that 7,700 units, we expect that about 35% or about 2,700 units will need to be rental housing. And so, it's going to be important for the city to proactively plan for more purpose-built rental housing as well as rental housing in the secondary market. Of that 7,700 units of housing need, ownership housing will account for about 5,000 units. So still recognizing the importance of ownership housing options as well, particularly as it relates to grade-related housing for families. Of that overall need of 7,700 units, we do expect that about 22% of units will need to be affordable, as per how we've defined affordable housing here in our report, and that totals about 1,680 units that will need to be affordable to accommodate the city's housing needs over the next decade. So now I'm going to pass it over to Tim Welch to speak to more specifically on the Attainable Housing Action Plan and Implementation Plan, and how to move forward building on this technical analysis.
Great, thanks, Eric. And if you can indulge me and move forward slides, I think you still have control of the slides.
I sure do.
Thanks very much. Yes, from all the analysis work that's been done, we identified some of the strategic priorities. Not surprisingly, a key focus is to continue to increase the affordable housing supply, look for ways to support local developments that can help meet a range of the housing needs, and also to continue to, as Eric mentioned, your very positive efforts and for helping people who have housing insecurity. Next slide. Some of the directions is to adopt a range of affordability definitions, to look to continue to diversify the types of housing developments, continue your very strong focus on supportive housing as a key component to helping to meet that goal of functionally ending homelessness. It's going to be very important to expand that workforce housing, that some of which may be at affordable levels, others may be at the lower end of market, and also to look to ensure a range of culturally appropriate housing. Next slide. When we look at some of the recommended actions, there will be a need for greater density, for increase in the amount of apartments that will be built to boost the housing density. That helps both with workforce housing and moderate income housing, but also helps with apartment style structures, of course, help with accessibility as the population continues to age. So that we're looking for in point 2 for the city to prioritize and target its efforts to continue to encourage and promote the residential and mixed use development in areas of the city where there's the greatest potential for that type of development. The city's previously made good strides on intensification on the smaller scale in terms of adding additional residential units, to continue that work and to make the rules clear to allow up to 3 units in every single family home lot, whether it's through secondary suites or garden suites in the rear yard, sometimes laneway housing, and to keep up. It's been a busy 2 to 3 years provincial planning direction on intensification. And then to continue the work that St. Thomas has done, working with many of its community partners who both provide housing but also provide support services, to work towards that goal of achieving 150 supportive housing units in St. Thomas. Next slide. So when we look also for supporting a variety of local developments for meeting the housing needs, looking at land opportunities, we're aware that the city has been looking at some of its own surplus sites and also promoting that range of infill or intensification opportunities where servicing is available. To consider regulatory incentives through whether it's more flexibility on parking requirements, some greater building height and density, and a focus on sped up processing of residential development applications. With financial incentives, it's always a fine balancing act. Obviously, council is always attuned to the financial realities of running the municipality, but are there further opportunities that can help reduce some of the upfront financial costs that a developer, whether it's nonprofit or private, faces when trying to move forward with residential developments? And are there other incentives that can potentially reduce the operational costs moving forward? Recognize that there was good news very recently for a housing accelerator fund for the city, and that could provide some source of revenue for exploring financial incentives. And that also could be an opportunity to expand the community improvement plan that's been in place for residential. That's an approach that a number of municipalities that have had housing accelerator, the federal government's housing accelerator funds approved, have gone that route or are exploring that route of incentives through an enhanced CIP. Next slide. With the specific actions is to do as thorough as you can to look at available city-owned lands that could be viable for housing developments, and we know some of that work is underway. That should also include looking at a combination of municipal activities. So whether it was a new library, very recently the city of Kitchener announced it's looking to combine a new fire hall with affordable housing on top of the fire hall. So to keep looking and I'll say pushing the envelope a little bit where you can to look for the use of that city-owned land or a combination of city activities on city-owned land that can be combined with housing development. Continue to look at potential structures that are there that are unused or significantly underused, or in some cases abandoned, to see if there can be that repurposing of commercial space to address housing shortages. And then continue to look at, again, there's been very good progress over the last number of years on the planning approvals and more flexibility for local zoning, but to see if there are some further changes that can be made to help expand the housing supply within the urban areas that's more compact, more environmentally sustainable, and help with the price issues, the cost issues that are out there in the community. Next slide. To touch again on the support for people who are facing or have faced housing insecurity, to try to increase, and I know there's some emphasis on particularly high acuity supportive housing. That's should be a high priority, and we believe it is a high priority for the city to create a new high acuity supportive housing development. Recognize the really positive work, this working relationship the city has with the existing shelter organizations, certainly to continue to work with them to provide positive work. But the goal really of the city ideally is to not increase the number of shelters. It's to get people out of shelters and of course into housing, and in many cases from shelters into supportive housing. Next slide. For the actions, again, the actions from the directions flow on that continued focus to functionally end homelessness through the creation of new supportive housing, and also through the shelters to have safe spaces for people who have been homeless have a variety of issues to deal with. And we know that there has been really good work with city staff to continue to work with people who both operate organizations that operate the shelters, as well as trying to incorporate feedback from people who are involved in the shelter system about having that flexibility, having supports to try and deal with those barriers on an ongoing basis. Next slide. So in conclusion, overall, that we knew there, as Eric has talked about, the expectation is there will be significant ongoing growth in the population in the city, as well as the economic growth in the city. And there is going to continue to need quite a broad choice or a wide variety of different types of housing, both physical types of housing and ranges of affordability to help meet that widening demographic group. So there's going to be also important is to have that range of housing as part of your economic growth plan. So it's both housing needs in itself, but also housing needs are really important to help continue that economic growth that's happening in St. Thomas, so that people moving into the community have a suitable market choice at a range of affordability. And as I touched on previously, that with the continuing aging of the population, that's going to influence the demand for new housing, and including accessible housing and housing that seniors can age into place. So we're going to need more and more of that housing across the city. Next slide. That there will be certainly greenfield growth happens, residential development, but also to continue to try and have that balanced for more opportunities also for intensification and infill. Of course, the increase in housing and housing density is going to require significant increases in local infrastructure, whether it's pipes below the ground, larger pipes below the ground, increased transit infrastructure and other service needs. And so there just needs to be continuing coordination, which there already is, but continuing coordination to help deal with this significant level of growth that's going to occur. And of course, doing the financial planning for that growth, for that residential growth. What are the impacts on the municipal finances, including taking a look at what the city may be able to afford in terms of potential housing incentives. Next slide. So we hope you find this study helpful to serve as a foundational document for helping to meet the plan for and meet the housing needs in St. Thomas. And we also feel that things have changed. As you've seen, we've had different periods of growth where a little more gradual, and then the last number of years more significant. So it is important to be updating the housing needs assessment of every 5 years. Thanks very much. I think Eric and I are certainly more than pleased to have comments and questions from council.
Thank you very much. Certainly, any questions from council? Councillor Clark? Councillor Baldwin-Sands to follow.
Thanks, Your Worship. On page 7 of your executive summary, under supporting local development, you mentioned the opportunity to look at innovative construction methods. And I was just wondering if you could expand on that a little bit, what you're seeing in some other centers as examples of what's being done.
Eric, I could respond to that if you'd like.
Sure.
And partially last Friday afternoon, I was in Brantford touring a modular housing factory. So looking for ways that housing construction can happen more efficiently. In your own community, of course, there's the Element 5 that's made good strides in terms of looking at panelization approaches for more cost-efficient housing. So we've seen in some of those models some improvements in terms of timing efficiency, where we're not seeing dramatic decreases in the overall cost of construction, but it's still really modular, and panelization is still somewhat in its infancy in Ontario. So we're hoping I think with more and more firms getting more projects under their belt and more experience, that will help with looking at some of the innovative approaches that could be more cost efficient as we move forward.
Okay. Councillor Baldwin-Sands.
Thank you. First and foremost, thank you very much for this report. It shows us that we've been doing a lot of work, but there is more work that we do need to do. And that means to also continue to providing the supports to our city staff and the amazing group that we have there in order to get the job done. One of the things that I have been advocating for in the past with these reports, and did the last time as well, is that ensuring that, especially with our new builds, that there is a certain percentage of the new builds be affordable. I would like to hear what your feedback is on that, and that is my first of a few questions, please.
Eric, maybe I can make a comment. I mean, there has been, as councillors are likely aware, there has been discussion and legislative changes over the past number of years at the provincial level on inclusionary zoning, for example, having percentages of housing that will be permitted or would be required to be affordable. The provincial government, it's now 4 or 5 years ago, modified the previous provincial government's intent on that and limited it to major transit station areas. So that in the GTA, it would be GO stations, or in Toronto near subway stations, for example. So the province did put some limitations on that. It's been more challenging for municipalities that are not in that situation to have an absolute legislative requirement. That some municipalities that are not in that situation of major transit station areas have brought in sometimes simple administrative, saying, okay, when a new proposal comes in, to have on the form, what's your approach, developer, to helping us meet the affordable housing needs in the community? So that at least can start a discussion, and that has happened in some communities where there's not as direct a legislative tool to require that. So those can be two approaches. I was going to make a comment about continuing advocacy at the provincial level, but I don't want to stray too far into the advocacy side of things, if I may. No, Eric, if there's anything further you want to add? Oh, you're on mute, Eric.
Oh, sorry about that. Thanks. I was going to add that one of the purposes of this study is to serve a foundational piece, a roadmap to identify housing needs, and part of that is future housing needs, and really looking at it from that affordability lens. And we've been able to identify for the next 10 years the share of housing that needs to be affordable at 22%. So there isn't always an opportunity to make amendments to your official plan and policies, for example, to identify the need for affordable housing targets. They can be, fairly general or more definitive, but certainly that's something that other municipalities are doing, and as a means to identify targets for affordable housing and through their OPs. So again, there are methods to approach this, and definitely this provides for at least some more quantitative metrics, by which the community should be planning for housing development and the quantum of need for affordable options.
Councillor Baldwin-Sanson.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your response. My next one was on the CIP expansion, or community improvement projects, and the ability to expand and intensify those. And I wanted to thank you very much for that. I also want to give kudos to our mayor for when he does talk to our developers, because he does bring to the floor that we do have the community improvement plan available in this community. And I don't think that was emphasized in the report. And I wanted to give a shout out to the mayor for his continuing advocacy around that, on not just here in our community, but also when we have an opportunity at provincial level. But what is missing for me is the ability to educate and communicate inside our own community, because there are people in our community who are purchasing property and don't know about the community improvement plan in order to be able to make those necessary changes to some of the properties that we do have. So I think that is something that we as a community and as a council can do. I also, when you brought up the innovative and the construction, I agree with Councillor Clark's comments, but I also want to point out that we do have a really great partner in this community that does innovative and very good constructions. And I think looking at partnerships in the long and short term would be a good way to address some of our short-term need, as well as some of the affordable housing projects that we want to see get out the door. So again, I would like to thank you for your presentation and look forward to see this become a piece of action. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Your Worship. More of a comment. What frustrates me is we talk in the report here about supporting local direction and directives. And, we've got all these tools in place, but who's the only one building affordable housing? It's us. We got lucky with Prespa on Flora Street and we're able to partner with them. But even with all these tools, the developers aren't building what we need. I don't know how we're going to fill this 22% gap of 1,680 homes and hoping that the private sector is going to do it. We've given them the tools and they haven't utilized them. So my concern is that the only one that's in the affordable housing game is us. And I don't know who else is going to solve it. I don't know what further incentives we can provide to developers to encourage them to do something, because even on the infills that are going up, whether it's on Miller Street by Councillor Gibson or down the street from down here on Scott Street, these are great infills, but they're not affordable. These are they're market rent. So I don't know what magic wand you can offer us, but even with all these tools, we're not getting what we need. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Herbert.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I'm just going to expand what Councillor Peters just said. I know when I went to a conference earlier when I was elected to City Council, and it was about affordable housing. And I just smile when I see the definition of affordable housing here. They talk about rental, the government, 1,000 something. That's not a true definition of affordable housing. Affordable housing, I was told, is what you can afford. That is affordable housing. So they defined it here in the province, and expanding on what Councillor Peters just said, we have to work with the developer. You can't expect the developer. Perfect example was a year ago in London, they approved a 1,600 unit apartment building, and the city council there wanted 100 units designated as affordable housing by definition. And they fought about it, and they ended up, I think, with 50 or 60. But we're really fortunate in St. Thomas. We understand what affordable housing is. We have a lot of homeless people out on the street, and we've been very fortunate to partner with Indwell, Transit Building and Queen Street. And those buildings are run by Heather Sheridan and Danielle Neeson. They do a great job getting people in and out of there. We're always working on it. One of the mandates of your worship was we have to get zero homeless in the city. It's been driven into my brain. That's what we have to work at. And we are working at it. We have other things on the go. And but still, we have to work with the developers. Councilor Peters said, if they build 100 units, we have to say, gee, can we have 10 of those to meet the provincial standard of 1,000 or whatever it is for 2 bedrooms, 1,400? Because we have to do something for people who cannot afford it. And but anyway, so I think we're in the right direction with our city, and we've worked hard to do it. And I'm looking for good things in the future with our true definition of affordable housing is what you can afford. If you can't afford $1,000, you're in trouble. You might be out in the street. So I just smile when they give a dollar figure on affordable housing. It's great, but you did touch in the report about affordable housing, how it's flexible and stuff, but back to my original definition is what you can afford. That's affordable housing. So thank you very much.
With council's permission, I have a couple points to make. Thank you for the report. Very detailed. We 5 years ago, basically this council sat and developed a strategic plan moving this city forward on a number of areas. Housing certainly was one of them, but so was jobs, so is parks, so is amenities, that we have enough servicing and wastewater and such to move forward. And as you see in our last 3 or 4 years, numbers of housing starts, be they apartments or single family homes, have increased significantly. But what I wanted to ask you that has to do with this report, because I see us certainly taking your report and using it as the meat for in our next strategic plan of how many housing units and what types of housing units do we need to move forward. But you're kind of stuck on this 22% need to be affordable. Not disagreeing with you on today's snapshot of where we are. But one of the other things this council has really worked hard on is not only trying to develop housing over the next 5 years or the last 5 years, but having to develop the economic situation in our community that includes jobs. So that moving forward, perhaps the percentage of affordability can be decreased by us continuing to attract great employers to our community also, and make it so that, as you say, we need workforce housing. No, not suggesting that's not the case. But if we can continue as a council to increase the level of that workforce, then the cost of workforce housing starts to match that in a better way. I think we'll take the chance that that's part of our solution towards affordability. But I've never seen a group work better together than this council on trying to eliminate homelessness, to provide the type of housing needed by a community. And I'll put this group up against anybody on the use of the skills we already have. And not to correct anything any of the council said here today, but we've got even private developers participating quite well in housing projects, whether it's Doug Terry and the group with the Tiny Hope project, or Doug Terry and the Hayho group with the land given to the Eastwood housing project that is, again, a truly affordable housing project of 85 units, that we said, hey, ask us, we'll play too. The city can play in that as long as we'll have some affordability for some people in the end of it too. I think what Councillor Peters also mentioned, the unique thing we did with the Prespa project. We let a builder almost finish a 24-unit, one-bedroom apartment building, and then said, hey, how about leasing the whole thing to us? And let us go out and use it for seniors housing. And I think there's unique ways, and I want you to share that with other communities. There's unique ways like that of communities moving forward. Yes, I still consider someone who is homeless, who does not have a home, as in the most need for housing, but there is a large range of supportive and affordable that needs to come next. I wouldn't trust anybody but this council to make it happen in St. Thomas. But I thank you for setting a standard for us with this report, letting us look forward. One last question for you. This is a report about St. Thomas, and yet our housing unit does all of Elgin County. And there are many great projects occurring across Elgin County also, which I have to count as the mayor of St. Thomas as housing for St. Thomas too. It's not only going to be the housing that is built inside the four walls of St. Thomas, but the developments happening in Talbotville right now, or in Shedden right now, or in Elmer with their expansion of subdivisions and what they have going forward. The municipalities around us said thank you for helping attract jobs for our community. We'll take some of those, and we'll build some housing units to go with it. And so, although you've set us a great target of about 7,200 units over the next 10 years, if you look at last year's number, we're already doing 10% of that a year. So we feel pretty comfortable. If we can get our neighboring communities to continue to play and help, then it will be quite easy for us to beat this report by a long way, which I think we've always said. The supply of numbers is important. If we can increase the supply, the affordability does go down. We continue to believe that to be true. So did you take into account the rest of our county or other major developments happening right on our borders?
I can speak to that. The study itself was focusing on housing needs in the city of St. Thomas. So yes, I mean, that was defined by the municipal boundary. However, more broadly, when looking at, influences on housing needs, demographic, economic drivers, and, growth pressures that's placing on the city, that's obviously much more of a regional narrative. And so certainly there was a much more of a regional and macro perspective provided in that regard. But the actual housing need itself and all the growth related metrics are specific to St. Thomas. Certainly, St. Thomas is not an island, and you operate in a broader regional market in terms of a commuter shed and especially with major catalysts such as the EV battery plant now being constructed in St. Thomas. It's going to generate even more regional patterns with respect to commuting and sort of that interdependency between St. Thomas and other municipalities that you neighbor. So I think this conversation will be important, and perhaps there'll be an opportunity in the future to perhaps look at housing needs more from a regional market perspective, looking at St. Thomas and the neighboring municipalities as a broader geographic area.
Well, thank you for that, because we think that's part of our strength, is that the city of St. Thomas social services and social housing is driving the housing across the county, not just in the city of St. Thomas. As housing or reduced housing or homelessness occurs in some of our other smaller communities, St. Thomas will receive that homelessness in a greater extent than it would be in staying home in that municipality too. So thank you. Look at this is the second Watson report I've been pretty impressed with. Thank you so much with our growth study report, and thank you so much with this housing report. And I share with you that I believe this council will take it and insert it in its own strategic plan of these are the types of numbers we better shoot for. These are the types of things we have to be able to do as a community if we're going to continue to be as strong as we are as a community. So thank you for some pretty important data here today. Any other questions? Do I have, sorry, I took a long time. The chair doesn't usually do, yes, he does. No other questions? Great.
Your worship, at this time, I have a motion that report SCSS 0525 relating to the Housing Needs Assessment and Action Plan for the City of St. Thomas be received for information. Moved by Councillor Wookey, seconded by Councillor Clark.
Further discussion or comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? That is carried. Thank you, gentlemen, for your help tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next item, your worship, relates to the Community Improvement Program grants for 15 Flora Street. I have a motion that report PDO 525 relating to the Community Improvement Program grants for 15 Flora Street be received for information, and further, the council direct that a bylaw be prepared to enter into a Community Improvement Program grant agreement with Prespa Sales and Rentals Limited relating to CIP application 2021-117. Moved by Councillor Kohler, seconded by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? That's carried.
Next item relates to an application for a zoning bylaw amendment to in the McGregor Farm Phase 2A subdivision. I have a motion that report PDO 825 relating to an amendment to the city zoning bylaw to remove the holding zone symbol from lands within the McGregor Farm Phase 2A subdivision, 34T 20502 be received for information, and further that the application by 1611905 Ontario Limited for an amendment to the City of St. Thomas zoning bylaw 50-88 to remove the holding symbol from the lands comprising the McGregor Farm Phase 2A subdivision be approved and staff be authorized to prepare an amending bylaw, and further that notice of council's intention to pass an amending bylaw to remove the holding symbol from the bylaw as amended be given pursuant to Ontario Regulation 545/06. Moved by Councillor Wookey, seconded by Councillor Clark.
Questions or comments? Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Worship. To Jim McComb, I guess. This report and the next report, are these related to the decision that unelected appointed body known as LPAT made overturning a decision that a duly elected council made?
Through you, your worship,
Mr.
no.
Pompili?
Through you, your worship, no.
Can I ask, how many, we've taken a number of holding symbols off here. How many houses are we talking about?
I don't have the number, but this is just a standard
Right.
process in terms of a holding provision that we put on these lots when we approve the subdivision and the zoning
Right.
to ensure that no permits are issued until all the subdivision agreement
Right.
clauses have been met and satisfied, including the installation of services. So a confirmation has been received that that's all in place. So by removing the holding provision, the holding provisions on these properties, we are now in a position to issue permits.
It seems to have been rarer over the last year or two, Lou. I mean, obviously having something to do with interest rates on some of the subdivision type growth. Is this the tip of an iceberg coming back?
Your worship, I hope so. There has been some delays in builders coming forward
Right.
for new single-family development. But the conditions are present now that this developer is comfortable going forward.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item is an application by Shawside Development Limited for an application to amend the zoning bylaw to remove a holding zone symbol from lands within Shaw Valley Phase 7 subdivision. I have a motion that report PDO 725 relating to an amendment to the city's zoning bylaw to remove the holding zone symbol from lands within Shaw Valley Phase 7 subdivision 34T 20503 be received for information, and further that the application by Shawside Development Limited for an amendment to the City of St. Thomas zoning bylaw 50-88 to remove the holding symbol from lands comprising Shaw Valley Phase 7 subdivision be approved and staff be authorized to prepare an amending bylaw, and further that notice of council's intention to pass an amending bylaw to remove a holding symbol from zoning bylaw 50-88 as amended be given pursuant to Ontario Regulation 545/06. Moved by Councillor Kohler, seconded by Councillor Herbert.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item relates to an application for temporary removal of part lot control on semi-detached dwellings. I have a motion that report PD 0925 relating to the application by Doug Terry Limited for temporary removal of part lot control for semi-detached dwellings on lots 23 to 28, 34 to 50, and 56 to 82 on registered plan 11M261 be received for information, and further that the application by Doug Terry Limited relating to the passing of a bylaw to temporarily remove part lot control for those semi-detached dwellings be approved, and further the council authorize staff to prepare a bylaw pursuant to section 50 sub 7 of the Planning Act, which provides that section 50 sub 5 of the Planning Act relating to part lot control does not apply to semi-detached dwellings on lots 23 to 28, 34 to 50, and 56 to 82 on registered plan 11M261. Moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Wookie.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item relates to proposed zoning bylaw amendment for the property at 451 Wellington Street. I have a motion that report PDO 425 relating to a proposed zoning bylaw amendment on land at 451 Wellington Street be received for information, and further the council authorize staff to prepare a site-specific draft amendment to zoning bylaw 50-88 to permit a proposed townhouse development on lands described as part of Lot 9, Concession 9, Geographic Township of Yarmouth, now in the city, and further that a public meeting be scheduled for March the 17th, 2025 at 6 p.m. in accordance with Ontario Regulation 545/06 as amended. Moved by Councillor Wookie, seconded by Councillor Kohler.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item relates to proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments for the property at 22 to 28 John Street. I have a motion that report PDO 325 relating to proposed amendments to the St. Thomas official plan and zoning bylaw 50-88 for 22 to 28 John Street be received for information, and further that council authorize staff to prepare site-specific amendments to the St. Thomas official plan and zoning bylaw 50-88 to consolidate commercial use across the entire property, which may be described as part of Lot 10 Plan 62 in lots 11 to 14 in the city, and further that a public meeting be scheduled for March the 17th, 2025 at 6 p.m. in accordance with Ontario Regulations 543/06 and 545/06 as amended. Moved by Councillor Wookie, seconded by Councillor Clark.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item relates to revisions to zoning bylaw 50-88 to address shipping containers, oversized vehicles, and to remove prohibition on billboards. I have a motion that report number PD 0625 relating to revisions to the zoning bylaw to amend or to address shipping containers, oversized vehicles, and to remove the prohibition on billboards be received for information, and further the council authorize staff to prepare site-specific draft amendment to the zoning bylaw to address shipping containers, oversized vehicles, and to remove the prohibition on billboards, and further that a public meeting be scheduled for March the 17th, 2025 at 6 p.m. in accordance with Ontario Regulation 545/06 as amended, and further that a public meeting also be scheduled for March the 17th, 2025 at 6 p.m. to present the proposed updated sign bylaw. Moved by Councillor Wookie, seconded by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Councillor Peters?
Thanks, Your Worship. I just want to thank staff for the comprehensive report that was done and the great analysis. The shipping container aspect we know was brought forward because of an issue that some neighbors were concerned about a shipping container on another adjoining property. If and when this bylaw is enacted, does that give us the ability to retroactively deal with that situation or any others that may have arisen in the community, or will that be a permitted non-conforming use because it was there before the bylaw was put in place?
I knew we'd eventually get Mr. McComb up today, so Jim, please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Peters. Unfortunately, the zoning aspects of this, we won't be able to do anything against any existing situations. For those, we have tried to use whatever tools we can just to ensure that if they needed building permits for those or any other site approvals, that made sure that they had in fact had those. But there's really not much we can do as far as these new regulations, new proposed regulations are concerned about that.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Your Worship, that concludes the items for this committee. Unless there are any further items from the members, we'll now move into community engagement and services. Our first item relates to the updated transfer payment agreement for children's services. I have a motion that report SCSS 0325 relating to an update on the implementation of the Canada-wide early learning and childcare system in St. Thomas Elgin, include an update on the new cost-based funding approach be received for information. Moved by Councillor Wookie, seconded by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item relates to revised childcare funding agreements. I have a motion that report SCSS 0425 relating to revised childcare funding agreements be received for information, and further the council approve entering into new childcare funding agreements based on templates attached to report SCSS 0425 with eligible children's services providers, and further that administration be authorized to add a bylaw to subsequent meetings in order to execute the attached draft agreement as it relates to funding for the operation of the childcare centers listed in the report and any new childcare centers who are eligible to receive funding. Moved by Councillor Wookie, second by Councillor Herbert.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
That concludes the items for this committee, unless there are any items from the members. We'll move into infrastructure and civic operations. First item relates to Athletic Park Field Lighting Tender Award. I have a motion that report PRF 1125 relating to the Athletic Park Field Lighting Tender Award be received for information, and further the council approve the award of the contract to FAF Electric Limited in the amount of $253,400 excluding HST. Moved by Councillor Gibson, seconded by Councillor Wookie.
Questions or comments? Councillor Herbert, then Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to assume that they're just talking one diamond. There's a lot of fields down there. Is there just a main soccer field? And that's the one that's going to be lit? Because I think that's a pretty decent price.
Mr. Bray, great to have you here tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Preston. Same to you. Through you to Councillor Herbert. We're just lighting the large soccer pitch.
Just
at
the
Ath
one.
Park, yeah.
To the worship, I know on some parks I've been to, they have big poles and they have lights focusing on diamonds beside them. So it's not just one. You light one, you light two. So it's the same standard, except the lights do two different fields. So I don't know what the fields are like down at the athletic park. I've been down for a while, but
Yeah.
I wonder if that was taken into consideration because there's a lot.
Working with the soccer league, their wish was just to light that one field.
Councillor Clark?
Thank you. With the two fields side by side, is there opportunity through the installation process up the middle that add-ons where we could gain some efficiencies by down the road when we do want to light the second field, that the original posts could be such that there'd be savings, that we kind of do the work in anticipation of lighting the second field?
Thank you, Mayor Preston, through you. I can't answer that definitively right now, but we can look into it. The poles are engineered for a load for the specific armatures and lights that are designed for this particular project. But it's something that we can definitely look into.
Okay. Further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
That concludes the items for this committee unless there are any further items from the members.
I have Councillor Baldwin Sands.
Thank you. I was hoping that Mr. Bray would come back. First, I would like to thank the staff for the communications of the update for the Parks and Rec Master Plan. It has been circulating multiple times. At our last meeting, I asked for an update on what the responses were to date. With February 28th fast approaching, I was hoping that Mr. Bray would be able to provide any updates on what the results are with the survey.
Thank you, Mayor Preston, through you. I have chatted with the consultant this evening, and he said they've received over 2,100 survey results to date. That's digital. We still have some paper copies. And as everyone knows, we're starting the face-to-face engagements now, so.
That's a great number. Thanks. Councillor Woodkey.
Thanks, Your Worship. While Mr. Bray's up there, I was going to ask him under unfinished business, but as far as pickleball courts go, this is my pickleball question because we're going to talk about rates for things coming up here in a second. All right, Mr. Bray, as people play pickleball, I love the fact that people are playing pickleball. I want to encourage more people to take up the sport because I want our citizens in St. Thomas to be healthy and active and be outside. That's the whole modus operandi of this whole deal. All right. As we move into the outdoor season coming up, hopefully shortly when this godforsaken winter's over, what's going to happen is I want to know how we work with reservations in the pickleball club. And I want to present to you what my fear is, what's happening and what might happen is that let's say of the pickleball courts at Pinafore specifically, most of them, but not all of them, are pickleball club. And I'm happy they're doing that. But then let's say you've got a couple other courts at the end that aren't being used for the pickleball club, but people can use them when they show up. But because of the pickleball users, there's too many of them for the courts, they go and kind of occupy those other two courts. All right, fair enough. But I play pickleball and I know how this operates. You know, so somebody comes and waits for those games to end, but they never end because when the game's over, the winners split and stay and then two other people come on. So it's a perpetual game that never ends. And so what you've got are people that are maybe new to the game who want to come and try it, but they can't try it because the courts aren't available. So I know that's a long preamble, but what do we do to make sure that when there's a split between the club hours, but there's a few free courts, what are we going to do to make sure that those free courts are actually going to be able to be used? Again, my point here is not to stick it to the pickleball club. Great, but I just want to encourage people to start in the sport because it's so accessible. And how might we do that? You know, aggressive signage, you out there with a, taser, what are we going to do? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Comment on the taser part first. I'd like.
Thank you. I will, Mayor Preston. I think Councillor Wookie is well suited to the taser side of things. That's a good question, and that's something we run into with tennis as well. And it's really, for lack of sugarcoating it any other way, it's an honor system. There is signage asking people to surrender courts after an hour of play. We, as you alluded or stated, you didn't allude, that's not happening. And it's a point of frustration. We are in the process of redoing the court. This is only at Pinafore. The courts at Gadaris are all open to the public. There's no club play there. So we are looking at the court usage policy. So we're going to be revamping that. I want to have that back at the end of March for council's consideration. All I can do is we can meet with the clubs and they even do it within their own clubs. Where they're rotating and not let their own club members in, or else one pickleball club does it to the other pickleball club. So it is a source of frustration. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer here tonight. So it's something that we want to meet with the clubs and have that dialogue with them.
As Councillor Wookie is our expert on all things pickleball, I'm sure he'll share with you your thoughts on how to solve this.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, I like, some signage, the signage that's very clear so that somebody who doesn't, I'm just thinking like, I've been over the courthouse and it's great to see some young people there and people who are just starting on the sport. Again, it's so accessible that there's some pretty clear signage, just so when somebody's showing up, to put it, I'm trying to think about from there. So when they show up, they're standing there waiting and they're like, okay, there's no free courts. So if we could have some, just as long as the signage is clear about what the expectation is, and but also the signage is clear about the hours for the clubs, and so at least somebody can look at the sign and say, oh, this is pickleball club now. You know what I mean? As long as we've got that, I think that's the best we can do. The other side of it is, like you say, at Gadiris Park there, like it's open all the time, and we can try to get the word out that way that that's a decent option as well. But yes, I was afraid that there wouldn't be an easy solution, but I just want to put the bug in our ear. And to people out there that are maybe listening tonight, that like we're trusting that you're going to behave like adults.
Thank you. Yeah, we do have signage planned with the hours as well. We will review the other signage that you noted about the 1 hour play, which is up. And that's a really good point. I'll take that back to staff about letting them know that Gadiris is available.
Councillor Herbert?
Thank you, Worship. I know what I'm going to suggest is not a perfect system, but have you ever thought of a sign-up board with all the times? You put 11, Herbert and Wookie playing, 11 o'clock, we're on that court. It's not perfect.
Yeah.
It's not perfect, but at least it gives people, you show up at the thing and there's open times, you put your name in, and at that time, 11, 12, 1, or whatever it is, you get to court. All kinds of ways to abuse it, but at least you've got your names down for that time. 11 o'clock, it's your turn, so.
Councillor Peters?
Thanks, Your Worship. Could you look at, there's some golf courses, they have this funny little tube, and you put your golf ball in it and goes in, and the bottom ball is the next one to go. Could you do the same thing with pickleball? Put your pickleball in, the ball that comes out first is the next one who gets the honors to go play.
Also a great way to collect balls. You could just go take them out of the rack. Go ahead, Mr. Bray. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I'm not sure to say what through you, Councillor, or sorry, Mayor Preston, to the tube scenario, but it's something to consider. People are booking courts online. So there is a definitive way of booking your court. As Councillor Wookie said, there's an adult honor system that's suddenly not at play at times.
Let's try another one. Councillor Clark?
Well, I think your plan to meet with the clubs themselves is the proper way to go, because part of the problem is that some of the clubs have been closing off membership. And so then they've got this pool of assigned time that we've given them. And if they've closed off membership, then those people are getting, you know, the prime time for whatever it was, $2 an hour or something. And all the new people in town, if you didn't get in on the original club, you've got no access. So I think in your talks with the club, they need to realize that they have to be looking for new members, or we need to maybe cut back on the amount of time they have and go back to, as you alluded to, the sign in, you register online hour by hour, and they don't get to, you know, the cream of the crop of the time.
Thank you, Mayor Preston. We've had that complaint too, that the clubs aren't taking new members and it's becoming pretty insular.
It's, we look for more information in after your conversations with the pickleball cartel. And come back to us with if there's something council can do to help you with this. But I mean, I recognize part of it is for us to have some more pickleball courts too, so.
Well, we did apply for the grant as we discussed, and
Yep.
perhaps a cabal is a better word than a
Yeah,
cartel.
okay, all right,
Yeah, thank you.
all right. Further topics? I'm having too much fun tonight. Can someone slow me down, please? Next.
Your worship, next committee is corporate governance and administration. First item relates to the 2025 fees bylaw for the Parks and Recreation Services. I have a motion that report PRF 0425 relating to Parks and Recreation Services 2025 fees bylaw be received for information, and further that staff be authorized to prepare pursuant to section 220.1 of the Municipal Act, a new fees bylaw to amend bylaw 188-2002. Moved by Councillor Wookey, second by Councillor Kohler.
Questions or comments? Councillor Herbert.
Thank you, Worship. I was one of the councillors that suggested we defer it because the 450, 500 slow pitch people were upset because of the rates. Well, Jeff Bray took the time to meet with them. They came to a conclusion that there's some flexibility, and it was solved. The problem was solved. So thanks, Jeff, for taking the time to do that. It was a big deal for the 500 people. So thank you very much.
Further questions or comments on this report? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Your worship, unless there's any further items from the members for this committee, that concludes committee work. Council will now reconvene into regular session. I have a motion that the recommendations, directions, and actions of council and committee of the whole, as recorded in the minutes of this date, be confirmed, ratified, and adopted. Moved by Councillor Baldwin-Sands, seconded by Councillor Herbert.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
No reports of committees this evening. We move into petitions and communications. First item is a request from St. Thomas Guides for a proclamation for World Thinking Day. I have a motion that Council of the City of St. Thomas proclaim February the 21st, 2025 as World Thinking Day in the City of St. Thomas, and further that the guiding flag be flown from February the 24th to March the 2nd, 2025 in the City of St. Thomas. Moved by Councillor Wookey, seconded by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item is a letter requesting a proclamation and a flag raising from Beta Sigma Phi. I have a motion that Council of the City of St. Thomas proclaim April 28th to May 2nd, 2025 as Beta Sigma Phi Week in the City of St. Thomas, and further that the Beta Sigma Phi flag be raised April 28th at 11 a.m. and flown for the week from April 28th to May 2nd, 2025 in the City of St. Thomas. Moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Kohler.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item is actually two letters received from Cam Walters of the Kinsman Club. The first is requesting an exemption from bylaw 23-2002 relating to fees associated with the sale of fireworks. And the second one is requesting an exemption requesting permission to store a trailer at the Joe Thornton Community Center. Your worship, I do have a motion that the letters received from the Kinsman Club requesting an exemption from the fees bylaw and permission to store a trailer at Joe Thornton be referred to Treasury and the Parks, Recreation and Facilities Departments for a report. Moved by Councillor Wookey. Seconded by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item is a
I
letter.
take it we're asking for that back in time to meet their dates? Okay. Perfect.
Next item is a letter received from Employment Services Elgin requesting free transit service for job fair to be held on April the 23rd, 2025 at the Joe Thornton Community Center. I've motioned that the request be referred to the Treasury and Environmental Services Departments for a report. Moved by Councillor Kohler, seconded by Councillor Herbert.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? It's carried.
Next item, a letter was received from Linda King and the Elgin County Drowning Prevention Coalition regarding water safety initiatives in the Lake Margaret area as part of the proposed Ryan Davies project. I have a motion that the letter be referred to the Parks, Recreation and Facilities Department for a report. Moved by Councillor Gibson, seconded by Councillor Baldwin-Sands.
Questions or comments? Councillor Baldwin-Sands.
Thank you. I also have an additional request. This is an item that is very important to me, and I was hoping that the Elgin County Drowning Prevention Coalition be invited to come and speak as a deputation to council at a meeting, hopefully very early in the future, maybe at our March meeting. And it could be done in a coordination with the Parks and Recreation and Facilities Department, or it could be a standalone. And I would offer that I would be agreeable to either one of those scenarios.
Okay, I mean, I'll ask the clerk, do we take from council to do that, or is that a request of the people wanting to come for the deputation?
Thank you, Your Worship. The normal process, according to Council's procedural bylaw, is that a signed letter be received from the individual or organization the Tuesday before the council meeting. So as long as we receive that letter, then we can place it. And if there is a matter of coordinating so that it's the same evening as a report, we can make that happen.
Okay, so we're going to defer this over to Parks and Rec, as we should, and good, and then also set this up to go when that report comes back. Is that what you're looking for? Okay, great. Perfect. Councillor Herbert, on the same topic?
Yep, on the same topic. Thank you very much. It's a pretty important topic that we're dealing with, but I just wonder, has the fire department had any input to this document? From all the things that have happened, they're suggesting this and suggesting that. Have you had any input into it? No? Okay. I think you should have some input into it. That's all. So thank you.
Perhaps we can make sure the fire department also gets the letter referred to them. Okay, great. It does require that the letter suggests a writing of a new bylaw too. So is it going to the appropriate places for that to occur? Let's send it there first. Okay, great. Thank you. Further discussion on this one? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item is a letter received from Integris Inc. regarding 2024 dividend paid to the City of St. Thomas. That's for the members' information. Your Worship, that concludes the items under petitions. If there's no further items from the members, we'll now move into unfinished business of council.
Any items on unfinished business? Seeing none?
We'll now move into new business of council. Your Worship, there is one item on the agenda, and it relates to the potential to cancel the February 18th, 2025 council meeting. At this time, there are very few items. We seem to have placed a lot of them on for tonight's meeting. So if the members would consider a motion that the February 18th, 2025 council meeting be canceled. Moved by Counselor Wookie, seconded by Counselor Herbert.
I'll call for questions and comments. If I could just ask, should something big happen, we could actually still call that council meeting to happen. Okay. We're not removing it completely. Counselor Clark?
Thank you. Don't have a problem with this one, but in the future, if we get to this type of situation, to me, it would be an ideal time where we do some strategic planning or we look at some topics that we haven't had time to get to.
Yep.
We have talked about that in the past, that we don't have opportunities to discuss in detail some future planning things. So I don't have any problems with this, but I'd like to not make it a habit and use the time in the future for other items.
I'm sure she will verify it. Our new city manager and I dumped some of that on her today too, that we need some time to look at strategic plan and where we're at. So thank you for also sharing that. I think you're right. So. Further discussion on it's actually next Tuesday's meeting, correct? Because of Family Day on Monday. So we wouldn't have been meeting on the Monday, we'd be meeting on the Tuesday. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll now move into bylaws. I have motion.
I have another new business. You're rushing me tonight. I wanted to recognize a friend and a great hard worker for this community on a recognition he received last week. And Sean's with us tonight, so he's going to be embarrassed because he doesn't like it when we do this. But Sean Dyke won the Joseph A. Montgomery Economic Development Incredible Work Award last week at EDCO, Ontario. And a couple of us got a chance to go down and watch him be surprised by this. It was quite incredible. But the amount of work that Sean has done in a really special way for this community on economic development over the course of a long career, not just in the last couple of years, has been more than recognized. I know that Sean would say it was his team, and it was. But he's a part of that great team that he leads. And so I wanted to make sure that we talk to the people at home and to this council tonight and said congratulations to Sean Dyke on his contributions to the moving St. Thomas forward. Thank you, Sean. Okay, seeing nothing else.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll now move into bylaws. I have a motion that leave be granted to bring in the bylaws. Moved by Counselor Peters, second by Counselor Kohler.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
I have a motion by Counselor Peters, seconded by Counselor Kohler, that the bylaws be now read a first time, referred to council and committee of the whole, and read a second time.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
And the first bylaw, please.
First bylaw is a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting held on the 10th day of February, 2025.
Questions or comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Carried. Second bylaw, please. Thank you.
Second bylaw is a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute and affix the seal of the corporation to a certain agreement between the city and His Majesty the King and Right of Ontario as represented by the Solicitor General. This relates to the Next Generation 911 Transfer Payment Agreement.
Questions or comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Carried. Next bylaw, please.
Third and final bylaw is a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute and affix the seal of the corporation to a certain agreement between the city and the Young Women's Christian Association of St. Thomas. This relates to the service manager contribution agreement.
Questions or comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I rise and report the successful passing of the three bylaws.
Thank you.
I have a motion by Counselor Peters, seconded by Counselor Kohler, that the report of council and committee of the whole on the three bylaws be received and adopted. The same be read a third time, engrossed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed and numbered.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
No public notices or notices of motion this evening. There is a need to move into closed session. I have a motion that this meeting be closed to deal with an employee negotiations matter, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, and a personal matter about an identifiable individual. Moved by Counselor Gibson, seconded by Counselor Baldwin Sands.
And I'll do the same as I do each week before we call the vote. We'll be now moving into closed session. Council will only rise from closed session in order to approve what it is done during closed session and then adjourn for the evening. So I thank all that came to watch us tonight and all that watched us at home tonight and all the rest of you that participated. It's been a fun evening, and we'll now say, let's go to closed session. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. All right.
Your worship, at this time, I have a motion that council rise from closed session. Moved by Counselor Herbert, seconded by Counselor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
No further items for open session. I have a motion for adjournment by Counselor Baldwin Sands, seconded by Counselor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. We are adjourned.